The sound of plastic cracking against metal echoed through the airplane cabin. 10-year-old Carla Monroe watched in frozen horror as her small rolling suitcase skidded down the aisle, the frame holding her father's photo splitting at the corner. The middle-aged white woman in the gray blazer and pearl earrings didn't even look back. "This is why they slow boarding down," the woman muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A man in row 8 stood up. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? That's a kid's bag." The woman crossed her arms, unbothered. "Children need to learn boundaries. If her parents raised her right, she wouldn't be in my way." That moment, captured on a college student's phone, would cost Skyjet Airlines $1.2 billion in market value within 2 weeks. By the time the video hit social media, it had already been viewed 3 million times. The hashtag ground Skyjet trended nationwide. Investors panicked. Longtime customers canceled bookings. And the woman's identity? She wasn't just any passenger. She was Claudia Hensley, the newly appointed Vice President of Customer Relations for Skyjet Airlines, the very company whose plane she boarded that day. The same company whose stock would plummet 14% in 7 days. The same company now facing congressional hearings on discriminatory practices. All because one executive couldn't tolerate a black child struggling with her luggage. But here's where it gets even more shocking. Instead of apologizing, Claudia Hensley prepared to sue Skyjet herself for wrongful termination. Her lawyer hinted at damaging secrets about the airline's hidden scandals, discriminatory hiring practices, passenger mistreatment, even an alleged cover-up of safety violations. Has a corporation ever betrayed your trust? Have you ever witnessed someone in power abuse their position against someone who couldn't fight back? This story exposes how quickly a moment of racism can unravel an entire company's reputation, and how the most vulnerable among us often pay the highest price. If you want to understand how racism operates at the highest levels of corporate America, and what happens when it's finally exposed, hit that subscribe button. This channel brings you the stories mainstream media won't touch, breaking down exactly how these incidents reflect deeper problems in our society. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Before Carla Monroe became the unwitting center of a national controversy. Before Claudia Hensley's name became synonymous with corporate arrogance. Before a cracked photo frame became a symbol of black childhood in America. Let me show you how a 10-second interaction on a Tuesday afternoon flight from Atlanta to Chicago exposed the rot beneath a billion-dollar company's polished exterior. And why, months later, America still holds its breath waiting for justice. Because this isn't just about a suitcase thrown down an aisle. It's about who we protect in this country, and who we don't. It's about what happens when the mask slips and reveals what's truly beneath. It's about how quickly we forget these incidents, unless we make a conscious decision not to. So if you're ready to see how deep this story really goes, stay with me. The details I'm about to share will make you question everything you thought you knew about the companies you trust with your money, your safety, and your children. And if you think you know where this story is heading, trust me, you don't. Because when Claudia Hensley finally took the stand, what she revealed about Skyjet Airlines shocked even her biggest critics. Are you ready to see how it all unfolded? Let's dive in. Carla Monroe was not supposed to be on that flight alone. Her mother, Tanya Monroe, had planned to accompany her daughter to Chicago for her sister's wedding. But when 3 nurses called in sick at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Tanya, who had already worked double shifts for 5 consecutive days, was asked to cover yet another emergency rotation. "I can't say no, baby," she told Carla that morning, dark circles under her eyes as she braided her daughter's hair. "People's lives depend on me showing up." Carla nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. At 10 years old, she understood sacrifice better than most children her age. She had been learning about it since she was 7, when her father, Marcus Monroe, a firefighter with the Atlanta Fire Department, didn't come home from a warehouse blaze in East Point. The photo in her suitcase, the one now cracked at the corner, was taken on her 7th birthday just 3 weeks before he died. In it, Marcus wore his firefighter uniform and had his arm around Carla, both of them grinning widely at the camera. It was the last birthday they would celebrate together. "You'll be safe," Tanya promised, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Aunt Denise will be waiting for you at O'Hare. Hold on to your carry-on, baby. Everything you need is in there." Everything included 3 changes of clothes, her sketchpad and colored pencils, her father's firefighter badge that Tanya had fought to let her keep, and that precious framed photo. Have you ever had to be brave when you were scared? Have you ever had to grow up faster than you should? For Carla, this flight represented more than just a trip to see her aunt. It was a test of her independence, a chance to prove to her mother that she could handle responsibility. that she could be trusted to navigate the world on her own, even for just a few hours. Tanya had prepared her meticulously. They had gone over the boarding process 3 times. They had practiced what to say to flight attendants if she needed help. They had even role-played scenarios, what to do if she felt sick, if she got lost, if a stranger made her uncomfortable. But they never practiced what to do if an adult deliberately hurt her. Because some things Tanya believed should never happen to a child. When Tanya dropped Carla off at the airport that morning, she watched her daughter walk through security with her yellow backpack and small rolling suitcase. Carla turned back once to wave, her smile brave but her eyes uncertain. "That's my strong girl," Tanya whispered, waving back until Carla disappeared into the crowd. If you're watching this from somewhere in America, take a moment to think about the children in your life. Think about how vulnerable they are when they navigate spaces designed for adults. Think about how much trust we place in strangers to treat them with basic decency. Now imagine sending your child off alone, knowing they carry something irreplaceable, not just a photo but a memory, a connection to someone they've lost. For Carla, that framed photo was her talisman. When she felt nervous about flying alone, she would unzip her suitcase just enough to peek at her father's face. His smile reminded her to be brave. Dad would be proud, she told herself as she sat at the gate, watching planes take off and land through the massive windows of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the busiest airport in the world where over 100 million passengers pass through annually. Among those millions was Claudia Hensley, who had just flown in from Skyjet's headquarters in Dallas for what she called a routine inspection of customer service protocols in Atlanta. Their paths should never have crossed. But as the universe often arranges, the most significant collisions happen by chance. If you've ever experienced a moment that changed everything, a split second that divided your life into before and after, then you understand what was about to happen to Carla Monroe on Flight SK-1422 to Chicago. Drop a comment below if you've ever witnessed someone being mistreated in public. Did you speak up? Did someone else? Or did everyone stay silent? Because what happened next on that plane would test not just Carla's courage, but the moral compass of every adult witnessing it. When boarding began for Flight SK-1422, Carla joined the line with Group 3. She had memorized her seat number, 14C, an aisle seat her mother had specifically requested so she wouldn't feel trapped by the window or bothered by people needing to get past her. Claudia Hensley stood several people ahead in the priority boarding line, scrolling through emails on her phone, barely glancing up when the gate agent called for first-class passengers and Skyjet Elite members. Neither of them knew they were about to become the center of a national conversation about race, power, and accountability in America. Neither of them knew that in less than 24 hours, their names would be trending on social media platforms across the country. Neither of them knew that the next few minutes would change both their lives forever. As Carla approached the jet bridge, dragging her small suitcase behind her, she took one last look at the Atlanta skyline through the terminal windows. Somewhere out there, her mother was starting another 12-hour shift, saving lives while trusting that her daughter would be safe in the hands of strangers. "I'll make you proud, Mom," Carla whispered, stepping onto the jet bridge. "I'll make Dad proud too." She couldn't have known that her courage would soon be tested in ways no child should ever experience. She couldn't have known that by the time she landed in Chicago, she would become a symbol of something much larger than herself. She couldn't have known that her broken photo frame would soon represent something profound about childhood innocence in a country still struggling with its demons. All she knew was that she needed to be brave for a few hours. All she knew was that her aunt was waiting for her in Chicago. All she knew was that she carried her father's memory in her suitcase, and as long as she had that, she could face anything. Or so she thought. Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport never truly sleeps. Even at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, Concourse be hummed with activity, a symphony of rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, and the constant beep of golf carts transporting passengers who couldn't make the long walk between gates. Carla sat at gate B23, her yellow backpack on her lap, her rolling suitcase positioned between her knees. She watched as business travelers in pressed suits tapped urgently on laptops, families corralled energetic children, and solo travelers dozed with neck pillows and noise-canceling headphones. At the adjacent gate, Claudia Hensley had just finished a meeting with the terminal manager. Her inspection of customer service protocols had yielded what she called significant deficiencies in staff performance. She had made 3 employees cry during her evaluation. "Standards are non-negotiable," she told the manager, who nodded nervously. "Skyjet leads the industry because we demand excellence. If your staff can't deliver that, perhaps they should seek employment elsewhere." The manager, a 15-year veteran of the airline industry, knew better than to argue. Claudia's reputation preceded her. In her 20 years with Skyjet, she had climbed the corporate ladder by being ruthlessly efficient. Some called her methods harsh. She called them necessary. "I'll be taking SK-1422 to Chicago to inspect operations there," she informed him. "I expect the boarding process to be flawless." As she walked away, the manager exhaled slowly. "Good luck, Chicago," he muttered under his breath. Have you ever encountered someone who seemed to enjoy wielding power over others? Someone who saw their authority not as a responsibility but as a weapon? Think about how that person made you feel, and then multiply it by 1,000 to understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of such behavior as a child. When the gate agent announced pre-boarding for flight SK-1422, Carla watched carefully, mentally rehearsing the boarding process her mother had taught her. First would come passengers needing special assistance, then first class, then Skyjet Elite members, and finally the main cabin by groups. She was in Group 3, which meant she had time to observe and prepare. Claudia Hensley strode to the priority lane, bypassing the forming lines with the confidence of someone who never questioned her right to go first. Her gray blazer was impeccably tailored, her pearl earrings catching the fluorescent light of the terminal. Her rolling briefcase, a luxury brand that cost more than most people's monthly rent, followed obediently behind her. The gate agent recognized her immediately. "Miss Hensley, welcome aboard. We're honored to have you on our flight today." Claudia nodded curtly, barely acknowledging the greeting as she handed over her boarding pass. By the time Group 3 was called, the priority lane had cleared. Carla joined the line, gripping her boarding pass tightly in one hand while pulling her suitcase with the other. The yellow backpack on her shoulders felt heavier now, weighed down by the responsibility of traveling alone. The line moved steadily toward the jet bridge. Carla followed the passengers ahead of her, careful to maintain the proper distance her mother had taught her. Not too close to crowd them, not too far to hold up the line, Tanya had explained. But as the line slowed at the entrance to the aircraft, Carla misjudged the distance. Her suitcase bumped lightly against the heels of the passenger in front of her. Claudia Hensley. The woman spun around, eyes flashing with irritation. "Watch it," she snapped, her voice cutting above the ambient noise of the boarding process. Carla stepped back, startled. "Sorry, ma'am," she stammered, her voice small. Claudia's gaze swept over the child, taking in her braided hair, her yellow backpack, her nervous expression, and dismissed her just as quickly. She turned back around without acknowledging the apology. A flight attendant at the aircraft door greeted each passenger with a practiced smile. "Welcome aboard SK-1422 to Chicago O'Hare. May I see your boarding pass?" When it was Carla's turn, the flight attendant's smile softened. "Are you traveling by yourself today?" Carla nodded, handing over her boarding pass with a slightly trembling hand. "Well, you're doing a great job," the attendant assured her. "Your seat is 14C, just down the aisle on the right. If you need anything during the flight, my name is Brianna, and I'm here to help you." Carla managed a small smile. "Thank you." As she made her way down the narrow aisle of the Boeing 737, Carla concentrated on not bumping anyone with her suitcase. The plane was already crowded, passengers struggling to find space for their carry-ons in the overhead bins. When she reached row 14, Carla faced a new challenge. The overhead bin was almost full, and at her height, she couldn't reach it properly. She stood on her tiptoes trying to lift her suitcase, but it was too heavy for her to raise above her head. Brianna, the flight attendant, noticed her struggling and started moving toward her. "Let me help you with that, sweetie," she called from a few rows back. But before Brianna could reach her, Claudia Hensley, who had been delayed in first class by a conversation with another flight attendant, appeared behind Carla in the aisle. "Move," Claudia ordered, impatience evident in her tone. "You're blocking the entire aisle." Carla tried to press herself against the seats to make room, still clutching her suitcase. "I'm sorry, I'm trying to." "This is why they slow boarding down," Claudia interrupted, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Unaccompanied minors should be seated last, not clogging the process for everyone else." The passengers in row 14 exchanged uncomfortable glances. A woman in 14B half rose from her seat, about to offer assistance. But Claudia didn't wait. She shoved past Carla with enough force to make the child stumble, then grabbed the handle of Carla's suitcase. "If you can't handle it yourself, you shouldn't bring it on board," she said coldly. And then, in a moment that would soon be viewed by millions, Claudia Hensley threw Carla's suitcase down the aisle. The suitcase hit the floor with a loud clatter, skidding several feet before coming to rest against a seat in row 16. The impact caused the zipper to partially open, and the framed photo of Marcus Monroe in his firefighter uniform slid out, the glass cracking as it hit the carpeted floor. The cabin fell silent. Carla stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes as she stared at her father's cracked photo frame. A man in row 8 stood up in shock. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? That's a kid's bag." Claudia crossed her arms, unbothered by the outburst. Children need to learn boundaries. If her parents raised her right, she wouldn't be in my way. The silence that followed was deafening, the kind that falls when witnesses to cruelty are processing what they've just seen, deciding whether to speak up or stay silent. Brianna, the flight attendant, rushed forward, her professional demeanor cracking slightly as she knelt to pick up the photo frame and suitcase. "Ma'am, that behavior is completely unacceptable," she said to Claudia, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I'll be filing a report about this incident." Claudia's expression didn't change. "File whatever you want. I have a meeting to attend in Chicago, and I won't be delayed by incompetent staff or undisciplined children." As Brianna helped Carla to her seat and carefully stored her suitcase in the overhead bin, passengers throughout the cabin exchanged shocked glances and whispered comments. What they didn't notice was a college student in row 12 who had captured the entire incident on her phone. What they couldn't know was that her finger was already hovering over the post button. What they couldn't predict was how quickly that video would spread, or how devastating the consequences would be for everyone involved. Madison Torres, a 21-year-old journalism major at Northwestern University, had been filming a day in the life video for her social media followers when she captured the incident. She had been documenting her trip home to Chicago after visiting friends in Atlanta, recording snippets of airport life to share with her modest following of 2,300 subscribers. Her phone was still recording when Claudia Hensley threw Carla's suitcase down the aisle. As Flight SK-1422 taxied toward the runway, Madison reviewed the footage, her hands shaking slightly. What she had captured wasn't just rude behavior, it was something darker, something that made her stomach twist with anger. "I can't believe she did that to a little girl," the passenger next to Madison whispered, leaning over to watch the video. "And did you hear what she said about how the child was raised?" Madison nodded, already trimming the video to focus on the key moment. She added a simple caption. "White passenger tosses little black girl's luggage on Skyjet flight from ATL to ORD. Who raised her like this? #racism #flying while black." The moment the plane reached cruising altitude and the Wi-Fi connected, Madison hit post on TikTok, X, and Instagram simultaneously. By the time Flight SK-1422 began its descent into Chicago, Madison's phone was vibrating constantly with notifications. The video had already been viewed 50,000 times and was being shared across multiple platforms. Comments flooded in. "This is disgusting. That poor child. Anyone recognize this woman? She needs to be identified. At Skyjet, is this how your passengers treat children? Do better. That flight attendant deserves a raise for standing up to her. Look at how she doesn't even care that she broke the kid's photo. Heartless." As passengers deplaned in Chicago, several approached Madison to ask for the link to her post. Others stopped to offer words of support to Carla, who clutched her damaged photo frame tightly against her chest as she waited for her aunt. Denise Washington, Carla's aunt, was waiting at the gate, her expression shifting from joy to concern as she saw her niece's tear-stained face. "Baby, what happened?" she asked, kneeling to embrace Carla. Before Carla could answer, a woman approached them. "Are you her mother?" she asked Denise. "I'm her aunt," Denise replied cautiously. The woman introduced herself as Patricia Gaines, a family therapist from Oak Park. "I was on the flight. There was an incident, it's already going viral online. Your niece was mistreated by another passenger and someone recorded it." Denise's expression hardened. "What do you mean, mistreated?" Patricia explained what had happened, showing Denise the video that was now circulating on her own phone. As Denise watched, her hand tightened around Carla's shoulder. "Who is this woman?" she demanded, staring at Claudia Hensley's face on the screen. "No one knows yet," Patricia answered. "But people online are working to identify her. Have you ever witnessed something unjust and felt that burning need to tell others? Have you ever seen a video that made you immediately want to share it, to make sure everyone knew what had happened? That's the power of social media. It can amplify a single moment into a movement in hours." By midnight, Madison's original post had been viewed 3.2 million times. News outlets had picked up the story, with headlines ranging from child's luggage thrown by passenger on Skyjet flight, to racial incident aboard flight goes viral. Skyjet's social media team scrambled to respond, posting a generic statement. Skyjet is aware of a video circulating online regarding an incident on one of our flights. We take all reports of passenger misconduct seriously and are investigating the matter. Skyjet is committed to providing a safe and respectful environment for all passengers. The statement only fueled the fire. Comments poured in by the thousands. Investigating? It's on video. What's there to investigate? Notice how they don't mention it was a black child targeted by a white woman. I'm canceling my Skyjet credit card. This is disgusting. Identify the woman and ban her from flying. As the video spread, internet sleuths began working to identify Claudia Hensley. They scrutinized every frame looking for clues: her distinctive pearl earrings, her luxury briefcase, the way she carried herself with authority. A Twitter user who claimed to work for Skyjet posted, "That's not just any passenger. That's someone from corporate. I recognize her." Another user replied, "If she works for Skyjet, this is even worse. What's her name?" The original poster didn't respond, likely realizing they had risked their job by commenting. But the damage was done. The hunt intensified. By morning, Claudia Hensley's name began circulating in online forums. Someone had cross-referenced her LinkedIn profile photo with screenshots from the video. The match was undeniable. Claudia Hensley, VP of Customer Relations at Skyjet Airlines, read the caption on a widely shared post. The irony was not lost on anyone. The woman responsible for shaping customer experience at Skyjet had been caught on camera mistreating a child passenger. The woman whose job was to ensure travelers felt valued and respected had thrown a little girl's suitcase down an aisle. The woman who trained staff on proper interaction with customers had dismissed the child's feelings with cruel indifference. If you're watching this video right now, I want you to pause and think. How would you feel if this happened to your child? Your niece? Your little brother or sister? Would you stay silent? Or would you demand accountability? Hit that like button if you believe corporations should be held responsible when their executives abuse their power. Subscribe to see how this story unfolds, because what happened next shocked even the most cynical observers. As Claudia Hensley's identity spread across social media, journalists began digging into her background. They discovered she had been with Skyjet for 20 years, rising through the ranks from flight attendant to regional manager to director of training, and finally to vice president of customer relations, a position she had held for just 3 months. Her promotion had been announced in Skyjet's corporate newsletter with glowing praise. Claudia Hensley brings unparalleled dedication to excellence and a deep understanding of customer needs to her new role. Her vision will shape Skyjet's approach to customer relations for years to come. That newsletter was now being shared widely, accompanied by screenshots of the viral video, a stark contrast between corporate rhetoric and documented reality. By noon the day after the incident, major news networks had picked up the story. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all ran segments on what was now being called Suitcasegate. Financial news outlets focused on a different angle. Skyjet stock had dropped 4% in morning trading, wiping hundreds of millions from the company's market value in hours. Investors were nervous. If the face of customer relations could treat a child this way, what did it say about the company's culture? What other incidents might emerge? What would this do to consumer confidence in the brand? Skyjet CEO Richard Blackwell issued a new statement. "We are deeply disturbed by the video circulating online. The behavior displayed does not reflect Skyjet's values or expectations for anyone associated with our company. We have launched a full investigation and will take appropriate action. We have reached out to the family of the child involved to express our sincere apologies and commitment to making this right." But it was too late. The damage control seemed hollow to a public that had watched the incident unfold in high definition. Comments on the CEO's statement were merciless. "You only care because you got caught. Doesn't reflect your values? She's your VP of Customer Relations. This wasn't a random employee. This was your leadership. This is your values. Too little, too late." #boycott Skyjet. The hashtag boycott Skyjet began trending nationally, joined by #Justice for Carla as the child's name became public knowledge. Civil rights organizations issued statements condemning both the incident and what they called Skyjet's inadequate response. The NAACP called for a meeting with Skyjet's leadership team. Black travel influencers began sharing their own negative experiences with the airline. A pattern was emerging, one that suggested Claudia Hensley's behavior, while shocking, was perhaps not an isolated incident but a symptom of deeper problems within the company culture. As the story exploded across traditional and social media, Carla Monroe sat at her aunt's kitchen table in Chicago, quietly coloring in her sketchpad. The cracked photo of her father watched over her from its frame, now carefully taped together by Denise. "Why did that lady hate me?" Carla asked, not looking up from her drawing. "I didn't even do anything wrong." Denise, who had been on the phone with Tanya for the past hour discussing legal options, felt her heart break at the question. "She didn't hate you, baby," she said, sitting down beside her niece. "Some people just have darkness in their hearts that has nothing to do with you." "But why did she throw Dad's picture?" Carla persisted, her crayon pressing harder into the paper. "She broke him." Denise pulled Carla into a tight hug. "Your dad isn't broken, Carla. And neither are you. That woman might have cracked the glass, but she can't touch what's inside, not your dad's memory and not your spirit." As Denise held her niece, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was another news alert about Skyjet's stock price, which had now fallen 8% since the market opened. The financial fallout was just beginning. Anne Claudia Hensley, who had checked into the Four Seasons Chicago for what she expected to be a routine business trip, was about to discover just how quickly a life and career could unravel in the digital age. Because while she had been in meetings all morning, blissfully unaware of her new internet infamy, her face had been seen by millions. Her name had been shared by thousands. Her actions had been condemned by millions more. And Skyjet Airlines was facing the biggest public relations crisis in its history, all because one executive couldn't show basic human decency to a 10-year-old girl. The question now wasn't whether there would be consequences. The question was how severe those consequences would be. And whether justice for Carla would come at the cost of an entire company's reputation. The Skyjet Airlines executive boardroom on the 42nd floor of their Dallas headquarters offered panoramic views of the city skyline. But on this morning no one was admiring the view. 12 people sat around a polished mahogany table, faces grim as they stared at the large screen displaying real-time stock prices. Skyjet, SKJ, $42.17, 11.4%. 11%, muttered Chief Financial Officer Gregory Walsh, loosening his tie. "We've lost over $800 million in market cap in 36 hours. CEO Richard Blackwell stood at the head of the table, his normally confident posture now rigid with tension. At 58, Blackwell had navigated the airline through the post-9/11 travel collapse, the 2008 financial crisis, and the COVID-19 pandemic. But this was different. This wasn't an external crisis. This was self-inflicted. "Where is Claudia now?" he asked the room. Melissa Chin, head of public relations, checked her tablet. "Still in Chicago. We've advised her not to return to Dallas yet. The media is camped outside her home and our headquarters. We've arranged secure transportation to bring her to a private location where our crisis management team can prep her." "Prep her for what?" demanded Walsh. "She threw a child's luggage down an airplane aisle. She broke a photo of the girl's dead father. There's no prepping that away." The room fell silent. On the wall-mounted televisions, muted news channels displayed the same footage on rotation. Claudia Hensley throwing Carla Monroe's suitcase, the cracked photo frame on the airplane floor, side-by-side images of Claudia's corporate headshot and screenshots from the viral video. "We need to fire her," said Jamal Washington, chief legal officer. "Immediately and publicly. Distance ourselves completely." Melissa Chin shook her head. "It's not that simple. Claudia knows everything about our customer service protocols, including the ones we don't publicize." "What does that mean?" Blackwell asked sharply. Chin exchanged glances with Washington before continuing. "Our Selective Service Recovery Guidelines. The ones that instruct staff to prioritize compensation and assistance to high-value customers while providing minimum required service to economy passengers." "Those are standard industry practices," Washington interjected. "Standard, yes. But not something we want explained to the public by a disgruntled ex-executive," Chin replied. "Especially not when that executive was just caught on camera mistreating a black child. Have you ever wondered what happens behind closed doors when a company faces a PR disaster? Have you ever suspected that the carefully crafted public statements don't tell the whole story? Drop a comment below if you've ever seen a corporation say one thing publicly while doing something completely different privately. As Skyjet's leadership debated strategy, their customers were voting with their wallets. Cancellations had increased 340% overnight. The customer service call centers were overwhelmed, wait times exceeding 3 hours. Social media managers reported that negative mentions of the airline had increased by 8,700%. And it was about to get worse. At 2:17 p.m., a former Skyjet flight attendant named Miguel Rodriguez posted a lengthy statement on LinkedIn. After watching the video of VP Claudia Hensley mistreating a young passenger, I feel compelled to speak out. During my 8 years at Skyjet, I witnessed Ms. Hensley berate staff members until they cried, mock passengers with disabilities when she thought no one was listening, and explicitly instruct crew to provide inferior service to passengers with ethnic-sounding names. When I reported these incidents to HR, I was transferred to less desirable routes and eventually pushed out of the company. What happened to that little girl wasn't an isolated incident. It was consistent with the person I knew Claudia Hensley to be. The post was shared 50,000 times in the first hour. By evening, 3 more former employees had come forward with similar stories. One included screenshots of emails in which Claudia had referred to economy passengers as cattle, and suggested that families with small children should be contained in the back of the plane where they belong. If you're still watching, you're one of the real ones who cares about accountability. Hit that subscribe button to join our community of people who believe in exposing the truth, no matter how powerful the people involved might be. Back in the boardroom, Melissa Chen's phone buzzed with each new allegation. "This is getting worse by the minute," she told the executives. "We need to make a decision now." Richard Blackwell stared at the stock ticker, still falling. Then he looked at the muted television screens showing Carla Monroe's face, a 10-year-old child who had become the center of a national conversation about corporate culture, racism, and accountability. "Get me Tanya Monroe on the phone," he said finally. Carla's mother. "No more statements, no more crisis management until I speak with her directly." The room fell silent. "And someone find out what happened to that flight attendant, Brianna, who stood up for the child. I want to speak with her too." As the Skyjet executives scrambled to contain the damage, investors were already fleeing. Institutional shareholders began quietly reducing their positions. Retirement funds issued statements of concern about governance issues at the airline. Market analysts downgraded the stock from buy to hold or even sell. CNBC ran a segment titled, "Skyjet's Nosedive. Can the Airline Recover from Viral Video Disaster?" featuring interviews with brand management experts who estimated the long-term damage could exceed $2 billion when accounting for lost customer loyalty and increased marketing costs to rebuild trust. But the financial impact was just beginning. At 9 a.m. the next morning, Congressman Marcus Johnson of Illinois, whose district included Carla's aunt's neighborhood in Chicago, called for congressional hearings on discriminatory practices in the airline industry. "What happened to young Carla Monroe appears to be part of a pattern," he stated from the steps of the Capitol. "My office has received hundreds of calls and emails from constituents sharing similar experiences of discrimination while traveling. It's time for the airline industry to answer for these practices." The announcement sent Skyjet's stock into another tailspin, dropping an additional 6% in morning trading. By noon, the total market value lost had reached $1.2 billion. And still, Claudia Hensley remained silent. Secluded in a hotel suite with Skyjet's crisis management team, she refused to sign the carefully crafted apology statement they had prepared. Instead, she insisted that she had done nothing wrong, that the video had been taken out of context, that she had simply been maintaining order during the boarding process. "I will not apologize for doing my job," she told the team. That child was disrupting the boarding process. Her parents should have taught her better. The crisis managers exchanged alarmed glances. This was not going according to plan. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Tanya Monroe had taken emergency leave from the hospital and flown in to be with her daughter. As she sat in Denise's living room holding Carla close, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Monroe? This is Richard Blackwell, CEO of Skyjet Airlines. I wanted to personally express my deepest apologies for what happened to your daughter." Tanya's grip on Carla tightened. "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwell, I don't want your apologies. I want to know what you're going to do about the woman who hurt my child." There was a pause on the line. "Ms. Hensley has been placed on administrative leave pending our investigation," Blackwell said carefully. "Administrative leave?" Tanya repeated, her voice rising. "She's on paid vacation after what she did to my daughter? After she broke the only photo Carla has of her father? I understand your frustration." "No, you don't," Tanya cut him off. "You don't understand what it's like to send your child into the world alone, trusting that adults will treat her with basic human decency. You don't understand what it's like to work 3 double shifts in a row saving other people's lives, only to find out that your own child was humiliated and traumatized on your watch." The line went silent again. Ms. Monroe, what can we do to make this right? Blackwell finally asked. Tanya looked down at Carla, who was tracing the crack in her father's photo frame with one small finger. You can start by firing Claudia Hensley, she said firmly. Not administrative leave. Not a resignation with a golden parachute. Fire her for cause. Publicly. There are legal considerations. Then you can expect legal considerations from us as well, Tanya replied. I've already spoken with an attorney. But this isn't just about money, Mr. Blackwell. This is about showing my daughter that actions have consequences, even for powerful people who think they can treat others however they want. After the call ended, Tanya sat quietly, still holding Carla close. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Monroe, my name is Brianna Taylor. I was the flight attendant on your daughter's flight. I've been trying to reach you. There's more to this story than what's in the video. Claudia Hensley has a history at Skyjet that people need to know about. Can we talk? We all want to believe that corporations will do the right thing when faced with clear evidence of wrongdoing. We want to believe that justice will prevail. But too often, the powerful protect their own, until the cost of protection exceeds the cost of accountability. If you've ever stood up against injustice even when it was difficult, hit that like button. Your actions matter more than you know. As the crisis entered its third day, Skyjet faced mounting pressure from multiple fronts. Customers continued to cancel bookings and close airline credit cards. Shareholders filed the first of what would become multiple class action lawsuits, alleging that executives had failed in their fiduciary duty by allowing a toxic corporate culture to damage the company's value. Civil rights organizations announced a joint press conference to address what they called systemic issues of racial bias in customer service across the airline industry, exemplified by the treatment of Carla Monroe. And social media users continued to dig into Claudia Hensley's past, uncovering troubling patterns that suggested the incident with Carla was not an anomaly but consistent with a career-long approach to those she deemed beneath her. A former colleague from Hensley's early days as a flight attendant shared a group photo from 2003, noting, Claudia refused to stand next to any of the Black or Hispanic crew members for company photos. She would always maneuver to be surrounded only by white colleagues. We all noticed, but no one said anything because she was already being groomed for management. Another former employee revealed that Hensley had once instructed gate agents to seat passengers with foreign-sounding names in the back of the plane, away from first class, to maintain a certain atmosphere for premium customers. Each new revelation deepened the crisis, transforming it from a single incident of mistreatment into evidence of a systemic problem that had been allowed to fester for years. Inside Skyjet headquarters, the executive team reconvened. The stock had now fallen 14% since the video first went viral. Major corporate clients had begun suspending their business travel contracts. Flight bookings for the upcoming quarter were down 22%. We have no choice, Richard Blackwell told the room. Claudia Hensley must be terminated immediately. Jamal Washington, the chief legal officer, slid a document across the table. She's threatening to sue for wrongful termination if we fire her. She claims she was maintaining order during the boarding process and that the video has been misinterpreted through a racial lens. The room fell silent. She's also threatening to go public with internal documents about our customer service protocols, Washington continued, including emails from several people in this room approving policies that could be interpreted as discriminatory. Melissa Chin closed her eyes briefly. So we either keep her and continue to hemorrhage money and reputation, or we fire her and risk her exposing even more damaging information. There's a third option, said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Brianna Taylor, the flight attendant from SK 1422, standing there with the head of human resources. Miss Taylor has requested to address the board, the HR director explained. Given her direct involvement in the incident, I thought you should hear what she has to say. Brianna stepped forward, visibly nervous but determined. In her hand was a thick folder. I've been with Skyjet for 7 years, she began. In that time, I've documented every interaction I've had with Claudia Hensley. Every comment about passengers based on their race or appearance. Every instruction to provide different levels of service based on ethnicity rather than ticket class. Every incident of harassment towards staff members of color. She placed the folder on the table. I'm not the only one. There are dozens of us who have been documenting these incidents for years. We've filed complaints with HR. We've followed every proper channel. And nothing has ever been done. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ms. Hensley may be threatening to expose Skyjet's secrets, Brianna continued. But she's not the only one with documentation. The difference is we're willing to work with you to fix the problems, if you're finally ready to acknowledge they exist. Richard Blackwell stared at the folder, then at the stock ticker still falling on the screen behind Brianna. What are you proposing? He asked quietly. Fire Claudia Hensley. Publicly acknowledge the problems in our corporate culture. Commit to real, measurable changes in how we treat both passengers and employees. And make it right with Carla Monroe and her family, not just with money, but with genuine accountability. The room fell silent again as the executives considered her words. Outside, protesters had gathered in front of Skyjet headquarters, carrying signs that read "Justice for Carla" and "Boycott Skyjet." News vans lined the street, cameras trained on the building's entrance. The world was watching, waiting to see if one of America's largest airlines would protect a powerful executive or stand up for a 10-year-old girl whose only crime had been struggling with her suitcase. The decision they made would determine not just the future of Skyjet Airlines, but send a message about accountability in corporate America. A message about who we protect in this country, and who we don't. 3 days after the incident, Claudia Hensley finally broke her silence. Not with an apology. Not with a resignation. But with a television interview on a local Chicago news station known for its conservative viewership. The setting was carefully chosen. A hotel suite with soft lighting, comfortable armchairs, and a view of the Chicago skyline in the background. Claudia wore a navy blue dress that projected professionalism without appearing too formal. Her pearl earrings, the same ones she had worn on the flight, gleamed under the studio lights. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my side of the story," she told the interviewer, a sympathetic middle-aged man who had introduced the segment by questioning whether cancel culture had gone too far. "The video that's been circulating online shows only a fraction of what actually happened," Claudia continued, her voice steady. "What it doesn't show is that this child bumped into me twice during boarding, despite multiple requests to be more careful. It doesn't show that she was holding up dozens of passengers who were trying to reach their seats." The interviewer nodded encouragingly. "So you feel the response has been disproportionate to what actually occurred?" "Absolutely," Claudia replied without hesitation. "I've dedicated 20 years of my life to improving customer experience at Skyjet. I've trained thousands of staff members in proper protocol. What happened on that flight was unfortunate, but it's been completely mischaracterized as some sort of racial incident when it was simply about maintaining order during the boarding process." "And the child's suitcase?" the interviewer prompted. "I moved it out of the way so other passengers could board," Claudia said, carefully avoiding the word "through." "I had no way of knowing there was a fragile item inside. If her parents had properly prepared her for solo travel, they would have kept valuable or breakable items in her personal bag, not in an overhead bin where they could be damaged during normal handling." The camera zoomed in on Claudia's face as she delivered her final point. "I'm not a babysitter. Parents should know better than to let their children fly alone if they can't manage their own luggage. Have you ever watched someone refuse to take responsibility for their actions? Have you ever seen someone twist the truth to make themselves the victim instead of the aggressor?" That's exactly what was happening on screens across America as Claudia Hensley rewrote the narrative in real time. The interview sparked immediate backlash. #ClaudiaLied began trending within minutes of the broadcast. Viewers who had seen the original video pointed out the discrepancies in her account. She claims the child bumped her multiple times, but the video shows it happened once, lightly. She says she moved the suitcase. She threw it down the aisle. Notice how she blames the parents for letting their child fly alone. Classic deflection. But Claudia's interview also mobilized a different segment of the population. Those who saw her as the victim of an online mob, targeted for doing her job in a high-stress environment. "The woke brigade strikes again," read one comment. "This woman's career is being destroyed because she didn't coddle someone else's kid. If you can't handle your luggage, you shouldn't bring it on board," wrote another. Simple as that. The divided response reflected America's broader cultural and political polarization, a fact that Claudia and her newly hired personal PR team were counting on. By framing herself as the victim of cancel culture rather than the perpetrator of mistreatment, she had successfully shifted the conversation away from her actions and onto the societal response to them. It was a calculated strategy, and for a brief moment, it seemed to be working. Until Miguel Rodriguez, the former flight attendant who had first spoken out on LinkedIn, appeared on a competing network with receipts. "I worked directly under Claudia Hensley for 3 years, he told the interviewer, a black woman who had opened the segment by noting that she was a frequent flyer with Skyjet but was now reconsidering her loyalty. "During that time, I documented dozens of incidents that establish a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior. Miguel held up his phone, displaying an email from 2019. This is from Ms. Hensley to all cabin crew supervisors. It reads, and I quote, "When dealing with disruptive passengers, remember that our response should be proportional to their value to the airline. Diamond members receive 3 warnings and a complimentary beverage. Gold members receive 2 warnings. Regular economy passengers receive 1 warning before being marked for restricted future travel. Use your judgment with obvious non-frequent flyers." The interviewer leaned forward. And what does use your judgment with obvious non-frequent flyers mean in practice? Miguel's expression was grim. It was widely understood to mean that passengers who didn't fit the profile of business travelers, particularly people of color, families with children, elderly passengers, or anyone who appeared to be from a lower socioeconomic background, could be removed from flights with minimal justification. Do you have evidence that this policy was applied in a discriminatory manner? I have flight logs showing that passengers with non-European names were removed from Skyjet flights at a rate 340% higher than passengers with European names, despite similar reported behaviors. The interview continued for 30 minutes, with Miguel providing document after document, screenshot after screenshot, all pointing to the same conclusion. What had happened to Carla Monroe wasn't an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. It was consistent with a pattern of behavior that Claudia Hensley had not only exhibited personally but had institutionalized within Skyjet's customer service protocols. By the time the interview ended, #FireClaudia was trending again, joined by #SkyJetDiscrimination and #JusticeForCarla. If you believe that powerful people should be held accountable for their actions, hit that subscribe button right now. We need more voices speaking truth to power, especially when it comes to protecting our children. As Miguel's interview went viral, more former Skyjet employees began coming forward with their own stories. A pattern emerged. Those who had worked under Claudia Hensley described a toxic environment where discriminatory practices were not just tolerated but rewarded. A former gate agent revealed that Hensley had implemented an unofficial policy of selective upgrade eligibility that instructed staff to prioritize passengers who reflect Skyjet's premium brand image for complimentary upgrades when flights were oversold. "We all knew what that meant," the agent explained in a viral TikTok video. "It meant white, well-dressed business travelers. I was reprimanded once for upgrading a black family with children, even though they were next on the list based on their loyalty status." A former HR representative shared internal emails showing that complaints about Hensley's behavior had been systematically buried or dismissed. There was an understanding that Claudia was untouchable because she had dirt on everyone above her, the representative claimed. She knew where all the bodies were buried, so to speak. As these testimonials spread across social media and news outlets, Claudia Hensley's carefully constructed defense began to crumble. Her interview, rather than rehabilitating her image, had only intensified the scrutiny and provided a stark contrast to the mounting evidence of her long-standing patterns of behavior. But Claudia wasn't finished. As pressure mounted for Skyjet to terminate her employment, she played what she believed was her trump card. Through her attorney, she released a statement that sent shockwaves through Skyjet's executive suite. "My client has been made aware that Skyjet Airlines intends to terminate her employment in response to public pressure rather than based on the facts of the situation. Should they proceed with this course of action, Ms. Hensley is prepared to disclose extensive documentation regarding discriminatory practices that were not only known to but explicitly approved by Skyjet's executive leadership team. These documents will demonstrate that what occurred on Flight SK-1422 was fully consistent with company policies and practices that have been in place for years." The statement concluded with a thinly veiled threat. "Ms. Hensley has dedicated 20 years to Skyjet Airlines and deserves to be treated with the same loyalty she has shown the company. She hopes this matter can be resolved without the need for further public disclosure of internal communications that certain parties might prefer remain private. In other words, fire me and I'll take you all down with me." Inside Skyjet headquarters, panic spread through the executive ranks. Those who had worked closely with Claudia knew she was methodical about documenting everything, including conversations and decisions that had never been formally recorded. "She's bluffing," insisted Gregory Walsh, the CFO. "She can't possibly have documentation of discriminatory policies that were approved at this level. We've always been careful about what goes in writing." Jamal Washington, the chief legal officer, wasn't so sure. "Claudia has been with the company for 2 decades. She's worked directly with 3 different CEOs. If anyone has collected compromising information over the years, it's her. Richard Blackwell stared out the window at the protesters still gathered below. The stock price had stabilized slightly but remained down 14% from its pre-incident level. Major clients continued to suspend their contracts. The damage was already severe, but it could get much worse if Claudia went public with internal documents. What exactly could she have? He asked Washington. The lawyer hesitated. Potentially emails discussing our passenger profiling initiatives for security screening. Documentation of our selective service recovery protocols that prioritize certain demographics for compensation. Records of how we've handled previous discrimination complaints. Statistical data on which passengers get flagged for additional screening or removed from flights. All standard industry practices, Walsh interjected. Standard, yes. Legal, technically. But in the current climate, with the public already primed to see us as discriminatory? It would be devastating. Blackwell turned back to the window, watching as a new group of protesters arrived, their signs visible even from 42 floors up. Black Passengers Matter, and Boycott Skyjet, and I Stand with Carla. His phone buzzed with a text from the head of public relations. CNN just announced Tanya Monroe will be giving her first interview tonight. Breonna Taylor will be joining her. The walls were closing in. Claudia Hensley was threatening to expose Skyjet's secrets if they fired her. But keeping her employed while evidence of her discriminatory behavior continued to mount was becoming untenable. It was a classic corporate dilemma. Protect the individual who could cause the most damage or stand up for what was right and accept the consequences. As Richard Blackwell weighed his options, he couldn't help but think about the cracked photo frame that had started it all. A 10-year-old girl's most precious possession, damaged by an executive who couldn't be bothered to show basic human decency. Sometimes, he realized, the simplest moral questions were the most difficult for corporations to answer. And sometimes, the right decision was also the most painful one. What would Skyjet choose? Protect their own or stand up for a child who had been wronged? The answer would determine not just the company's financial future, but its soul. While corporate executives debated strategy and Claudia Hensley calculated her next move, Carla Monroe sat at her aunt's kitchen table in Chicago, carefully applying clear nail polish to the crack in her photo frame. Will this fix it, Auntie? She asked, her small fingers steady as she traced the fracture line. Denise Washington watched her niece with a mixture of pride and heartache. It'll hold it together, baby. Sometimes things break and we can't make them perfect again, but we can keep them from falling apart completely. Carla nodded, understanding more than a child her age should have to. Like when Dad died? Denise's breath caught. Yes, sweetheart. Just like that. In the living room, Tanya Monroe was on the phone with Benjamin Harris, the civil rights attorney who had agreed to represent them. She spoke in hushed tones, trying to shield Carla from the legal discussions, but the apartment was small and words like discrimination, trauma, and damages filtered through. Carla pretended not to hear. She focused instead on her father's smile in the photograph, on the way his firefighter uniform had always made her feel safe. He had taught her that brave people stand up when others are being hurt. Even when you're scared, he told her, especially when you're scared, that's when standing up matters most. She wondered what he would say about what had happened on the plane. Would he be angry? Would he want her to fight back? Or would he tell her to forgive the woman who had thrown her suitcase? Mom, she called, setting down the nail polish brush. Can I ask you something? Tanya ended her call and came to the kitchen, sitting beside her daughter. What is it, baby? Why does everyone keep talking about this being about race? The lady didn't say anything about me being black. Tanya exchanged a glance with Denise, both women momentarily at a loss for words. How do you explain systemic racism to a child who just wants to understand why an adult was cruel to her? Carla, Tanya began carefully, sometimes people don't have to say certain words for their actions to be about race. Sometimes it's about how they see you, how they decide in their mind who deserves respect and who doesn't. But how do you know that's what she was thinking? We don't know for sure what was in her mind, Tanya admitted. But when we look at patterns, at how this woman has treated other people who look like us, at the things she said and done in the past, we can see that this wasn't just about a suitcase or boarding a plane. It was about her believing she had the right to treat you as less than human. Carla considered this, her young mind wrestling with concepts that many adults struggle to comprehend. So even if she didn't say it was because I'm black, it still could be? Yes, baby. And based on everything we've learned about her since, it likely was. Carla nodded slowly, then returned to her task, carefully sealing the crack in her father's photo. I think Dad would want me to stand up, she said finally. Not just for me but for other kids too. Tanya's eyes filled with tears as she pulled her daughter close. "He would be so proud of you, Carla. So proud. Have you ever had to explain injustice to a child? Have you seen the moment when innocence collides with the harsh realities of our world? Drop a comment below if you've had to have these difficult conversations with the children in your life." That evening, as promised, Tanya Monroe gave her first television interview, with Carla's permission but without Carla herself. She had decided to shield her daughter from the cameras, to protect what childhood innocence remained. Seated beside Breonna Taylor, the flight attendant who had stood up for Carla on the plane, Tanya spoke with quiet dignity about the incident and its aftermath. "My daughter is 10 years old," she told the interviewer, her voice steady despite her evident emotion. "She was flying alone for the first time because I had to work 3 double shifts at the hospital. I'm a nurse in the ICU. I save lives every day, and I couldn't even protect my own child from being humiliated and traumatized on an airplane." The interviewer, a veteran journalist known for her empathetic approach, asked about the photo that had been damaged. "It was the last picture taken of Carla with her father before he died," Tanya explained, her composure finally cracking. "He was a firefighter. He died saving others just like I try to do every day at the hospital. That photo is irreplaceable. The frame can be fixed, but knowing that someone treated something so precious with such disregard, how do I explain that to my daughter?" Breonna Taylor reached over to squeeze Tanya's hand before sharing her own perspective on what had happened. "I've been a flight attendant for 7 years," she said. "I've seen passengers get frustrated during boarding. I've seen luggage disputes. But I have never seen an adult treat a child with the level of contempt that Ms. Hensley showed Carla. And the fact that this woman was responsible for shaping customer service policies at Skyjet makes it even more disturbing." The interview shifted to discuss the broader implications: how Claudia's behavior reflected systemic issues within corporate America, how black customers often receive different treatment than their white counterparts, how children of color were frequently adultified and denied the presumption of innocence afforded to white children. Throughout the conversation, Tanya maintained her focus on Carla. "This isn't just about policies or corporate culture," she insisted. "This is about my daughter. This is about a child who did nothing wrong except struggle with a suitcase that was too heavy for her. This is about teaching her that she deserves to be treated with basic human dignity, no matter where she goes or who she encounters." As the interview concluded, the journalist asked what justice would look like for the Monroe family. "Justice would be Claudia Hensley taking full responsibility for her actions," Tanya replied without hesitation. "Justice would be Skyjet acknowledging the harm done and making real, measurable changes to ensure this doesn't happen to another child. Justice would be my daughter growing up in a world where she isn't seen as less deserving of kindness and respect because of the color of her skin." The camera lingered on Tanya's face as she delivered her final thought. "I work nights so my baby can have chances I never had. And to see a grown woman treat her like trash on her very first solo trip. We deserve better. All of us deserve better." If you agree that every child deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, hit that like button right now. And if you want to see more stories that expose the reality of racism in America, subscribe to this channel. We're committed to telling the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might make some people feel. The interview resonated deeply with viewers across the country. #WeDeserveBetter began trending alongside #JusticeForCarla. Parents of all backgrounds shared stories of their children's first solo flights, of the trust they placed in airlines and their staff, of their horror at imagining their own child in Carla's position. But perhaps most significantly, the interview humanized what had become, for many, an abstract controversy about corporate policy and public relations. It reminded viewers that at the center of this national conversation was a 10-year-old girl who had simply been trying to visit her aunt. A child who had lost her father and now watched as strangers debated whether the breaking of his photo was an act of racism or merely rudeness. A little girl who sat at a kitchen table applying nail polish to a crack, trying to hold together the pieces of her world. Back in that Chicago apartment as the interview aired, Carla was not watching television. She was sitting on the floor of her aunt's guest room, surrounded by colored pencils and sheets of paper, drawing with intense concentration. Denise, checking on her, paused in the doorway. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" Carla held up her drawing, a sketch of an airplane, but with significant modifications. The seats were arranged differently, with special areas for children traveling alone. Flight attendants with friendly smiles stood ready to help. And most notably, there was a large sign at the entrance to the plane that read, "Be kind or stay behind." "I'm designing a better airplane," Carla explained. One where nobody throws anybody's stuff and everybody helps each other, and if you're mean you don't get to fly. Denise felt her throat tighten with emotion. That's a wonderful idea, Carla. Maybe someday you'll design real airplanes. Carla nodded seriously. I think I will. Dad always said I could do anything if I worked hard enough. As she returned to her drawing, adding more details to her vision of a kinder world, Carla Monroe was doing something remarkable. She was reclaiming her story. Not as a victim but as a creator. Not as a passive recipient of cruelty, but as an active designer of a better future. And in that moment, without knowing it, she embodied the resilience that has sustained Black children in America through centuries of injustice. The ability to imagine a world more just than the one they inhabit, and to believe in their power to help build it. While adults fought battles in boardrooms and courtrooms and the court of public opinion, Carla fought hers with colored pencils and imagination, with nail polish on cracked glass, with a quiet determination to hold on to what was precious despite those who would carelessly break it. This too was resistance. This too was power. And as her story continued to unfold in the national spotlight, Carla Monroe, without intending to, was teaching America a lesson about dignity that no corporate training program could ever convey. 7 days after the incident on Flight SK-1422, Richard Blackwell made the decision that would define his legacy as CEO of Skyjet Airlines. Standing before a hastily assembled press conference, flanked by the company's executive team, he addressed the cameras with uncharacteristic humility. After careful consideration and a thorough review of the facts, Skyjet Airlines has terminated the employment of Claudia Hensley, effective immediately, he announced, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. Her actions toward a young passenger on one of our flights were completely unacceptable and in direct violation of our core values. He paused, then continued with words that had been carefully negotiated with the company's legal team but which he had insisted on delivering personally. Furthermore, we acknowledge that Ms. Hensley's behavior was not an isolated incident but reflective of systemic issues within our corporate culture that we have failed to adequately address. For this, I personally apologize, not just to Carla Monroe and her family, but to all passengers who have experienced discrimination or disrespect while traveling with Skyjet. The statement sent shockwaves through the business world. It was rare for a CEO to admit systemic problems within their company, rarer still to do so while facing potential shareholder lawsuits. But Blackwell had made his choice: transparency over damage control, accountability over protection. What the public didn't know was what had happened in the hours leading up to that press conference. The final confrontation between Blackwell and Claudia Hensley that had forced his hand. After receiving Claudia's thinly veiled threat to expose company secrets if she was fired, Blackwell had requested a private meeting with her at a neutral location, a conference room at a law firm in downtown Dallas, with both parties' attorneys present. "You're making a mistake, Richard," Claudia had told him, her confidence undiminished despite the controversy swirling around her. "I built the customer service protocols that made Skyjet an industry leader. I know where every skeleton is buried. If I go down, I won't go alone." Blackwell had listened calmly, allowing her to lay out exactly what she planned to reveal: the passenger profiling system that flagged certain names for additional scrutiny, the compensation matrices that allocated different amounts based on demographic factors, the internal communications about maintaining brand image by catering to preferred customer types. When she finished, he had simply slid a document across the table. "What's this?" she'd asked. "It's a statement from Breonna Taylor and 27 other current and former Skyjet employees detailing your history of discriminatory behavior," he replied. "It's also a notice that they plan to file a class-action hostile workplace lawsuit naming you personally as a defendant, unless the company demonstrates its commitment to change by terminating your employment and implementing significant reforms." Claudia's expression had hardened. "So you're choosing them over me?" "I'm choosing to do what's right," Blackwell had corrected her. "Something I should have done years ago when the first complaints about your behavior reached my desk." "You'll regret this," she'd warned, gathering her belongings. "When I'm done, Skyjet won't just lose market share, it will become a case study in corporate implosion." Blackwell had remained calm. "Perhaps. But I'd rather lead a company that fails doing the right thing than one that succeeds by perpetuating injustice." With those words, the die had been cast. Claudia Hensley would be fired, and whatever consequences followed, Skyjet would face them head-on. If you believe that doing the right thing matters even when it's difficult, even when it costs you something, hit that subscribe button. This channel is dedicated to sharing stories of moral courage in the face of injustice. Stories that remind us what's truly at stake in these moments of decision. The press conference announcing Claudia's termination was just the beginning. Within hours, as Blackwell had anticipated, Claudia's attorney released a statement announcing her intention to sue Skyjet for wrongful termination, defamation, and breach of contract. "My client has been made a scapegoat for systemic issues that were approved at the highest levels of Skyjet's leadership," the statement read. She looks forward to presenting evidence in court that will reveal the truth about the company's discriminatory practices and the hypocrisy of its current position. Simultaneously, Benjamin Harris, the civil rights attorney representing the Monroe family, announced their own lawsuit against both Skyjet and Claudia Hensley personally, seeking damages for emotional distress, discrimination, and negligence. "What happened to Carla Monroe was not just an unfortunate incident," Harris stated. "It was the predictable result of a corporate culture that systematically devalued certain passengers based on their race. We intend to prove that Skyjet not only knew about these discriminatory practices but actively encouraged them through their policies and training programs." The stage was set for a legal battle that would expose the inner workings of one of America's largest airlines, and potentially transform how the entire industry approached issues of race, customer service, and corporate accountability. But even as the lawyers prepared their briefs and the media speculated about potential settlements, something unexpected was happening on social media. The hashtag Carla Redesigns began trending after Denise Washington shared her niece's airplane design on Twitter. "My 10-year-old niece, who was mistreated on a Skyjet flight, is redesigning airplanes to be kinder places. Her sign says it all: be kind or stay behind." The post went viral, with architects, engineers, and airline industry professionals responding with encouragement and even professional renderings based on Carla's concepts. A children's book publisher reached out about turning her ideas into an illustrated series. A STEM program for girls offered her a scholarship to their summer aviation camp. What had begun as a child's way of processing trauma was transforming into something empowering. A platform for her voice, her creativity, her vision of a better world. Meanwhile, as the legal machinery ground forward, Richard Blackwell was making good on his promise of systemic change at Skyjet. He announced the formation of an independent review board to evaluate all customer service protocols for potential bias, the implementation of mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees, and the creation of a new executive position, Chief Inclusion Officer, with direct reporting lines to the CEO. Most significantly, he invited Tanya Monroe to join the board as a special advisor on the Passenger Experience Initiative, a move that was both symbolically powerful and practically meaningful, as her perspective as a working mother and a healthcare professional brought valuable insights to the company's reform efforts. "We can't change what happened to Carla," Blackwell told shareholders during a tense but ultimately productive emergency meeting. "But we can ensure that her experience leads to meaningful change, not just at Skyjet but across the industry. Sometimes it takes a child to remind adults of our most basic obligations to one another." The stock price, which had plummeted in the wake of the viral video, began to stabilize as investors responded positively to the company's transparent approach to addressing its failures. While it remained below its pre-incident level, analysts noted that the long-term outlook had improved as Skyjet positioned itself as a leader in corporate accountability rather than another example of damage control gone wrong. But the story was far from over. 3 weeks after her termination, Claudia Hensley gave another interview, this time to a major investigative news program known for its hard-hitting exposés. The promotional clips promised shocking revelations about discriminatory practices at the highest levels of the airline industry, and evidence that will change how Americans think about air travel forever. As the interview date approached, speculation ran wild. What documents had Claudia preserved during her 20 years at Skyjet? What names would she name? How far up the corporate ladder did the problematic policies go? And would her revelations implicate other airlines as well, suggesting that what happened to Carla was not an anomaly but standard industry practice? The night before the interview was set to air, Benjamin Harris received an unexpected call from Claudia's attorney requesting a private meeting with the Monroe family. "My client would like to speak with Carla and her mother," the attorney explained. "Off the record, no lawyers present except for yourself as their representative." Harris was skeptical. "Why would we agree to that?" "Because what Ms. Hensley has to say could significantly impact both the legal proceedings and the public narrative surrounding this case. It's in everyone's interest to have this conversation before tomorrow's broadcast." After consulting with Tanya, who insisted on being present to protect Carla but was curious about what Claudia could possibly want to say to them, Harris agreed to the meeting, with strict conditions about its confidentiality and Carla's emotional safety. The meeting was set for noon the following day, just 6 hours before Claudia's televised interview would air nationally. What did Claudia Hensley want to say to the child whose luggage she had thrown? Was she finally ready to offer a genuine apology? Or was this another calculated move in a high-stakes game of corporate chess? And what revelations would she share with the American public that evening? Revelations that she claimed would change how Americans think about air travel forever? As the clock ticked down to these two momentous encounters, the nation held its breath, waiting to see if justice would finally be served, not just for Carla Monroe, but for all those who had suffered similar indignities in silence. Would Claudia's interview bring down Skyjet completely? Would Carla's family finally see justice? Or would betrayals within the company twist the outcome yet again? The answers would come soon. And they would shake the foundations of corporate America in ways no one could predict. If you've made it this far in the video, you're clearly someone who cares deeply about justice and accountability. Hit that subscribe button right now to make sure you don't miss the conclusion of this powerful story. And drop a comment letting me know what you think Claudia wants to say to Carla and her mother. I read every comment and I value your perspective on these important issues. Because this isn't just about one incident on one flight. This is about who we are as a society, about whether we truly believe that every person, regardless of their age or race or economic status, deserves to be treated with basic human dignity. This is about whether we have the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it costs us something. This is about whether we're willing to listen to the voices of those who have been silenced for too long. And ultimately, this is about whether we believe that change is possible, that we can build a world where no child has to experience what Carla Monroe experienced on Flight SK-1422. Stay tuned for the conclusion of this extraordinary story. The truth is about to be revealed and nothing will ever be the same.